Charles sat in his study, surrounded by the familiar comfort of leather-bound books and the gentle ticking of his grandfather's clock. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of his estate, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. He had always found solace in this room, but today something felt different. The air seemed heavy with unspoken truths. It had been 3 years since he married Camilla, and their life together had settled into a comfortable rhythm. She would tend to her gardens, while he managed his business affairs. Their evenings were spent sharing quiet dinners and discussing their plans for the future. Charles believed they had built something genuine and lasting together. That morning, Camilla had left early to visit her sister in the neighboring town. She had been making these trips more frequently lately, always with the same explanation about helping with family matters. Charles never questioned it. Trust had been the foundation of their relationship, and he valued the independence they both maintained. The phone rang, breaking the silence. Charles answered to hear the voice of Robert, his longtime friend and business partner. "Charles, I need to speak with you about something important. Can we meet for lunch today?" There was something in Robert's tone that made Charles pause. His friend sounded uncomfortable, almost reluctant. "Of course. Is everything all right with the Henderson project?" "It's not about business, Charles. It's personal. I'll explain when I see you." They arranged to meet at their usual spot, a quiet restaurant downtown where they often discussed both business and personal matters. Charles spent the rest of the morning trying to focus on his work, but Robert's unusual tone kept echoing in his mind. The restaurant was nearly empty when Charles arrived. Robert was already seated at their regular table, staring into his coffee cup. His usually cheerful demeanor was replaced by visible tension. "Robert, what's troubling you?" His friend looked up, meeting Charles's eyes with obvious discomfort. "Charles, I've been debating whether to tell you this for weeks. I care about you too much to keep quiet, but I also know how much pain this might cause." Charles felt his stomach tighten. "Whatever it is, just tell me." Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "Last month, I was in Millbrook on business. You know, the town where Camilla visits her sister. I saw her there, Charles. But she wasn't with her sister." The words hung in the air between them. Charles stared at the envelope, afraid to ask what was inside. "I followed them, Charles. I'm sorry, but I had to know. She was with a man I'd never seen before. They seemed very close. I took some photographs." Charles's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the envelope. Inside were several clear photographs showing Camilla walking hand in hand with a tall, dark-haired man. In another, they were embracing outside a small cafe. The final photo showed them entering what appeared to be a modest apartment building together. The images blurred as Charles struggled to process what he was seeing. This was his wife, the woman he had trusted completely, sharing intimate moments with a stranger. "Who is he?" Charles managed to ask. "I made some inquiries. His name is Michael Harrison. He's a writer, lives in that apartment building." "Charles, I also discovered that Camilla has been renting a small place in Millbrook for the past 6 months. She's listed as Catherine Mills on the lease agreement." I'm named. The false name hit Charles like a physical blow. Catherine Mills. She had created an entirely different identity for this secret life. "How long have you known?" Charles asked quietly. "I've been investigating for 3 weeks, trying to decide what to do. I hired a private investigator to be certain." "Charles, she's been living a double life. The visits to her sister, they're all lies. She spends those days with him." Charles studied the photographs again, searching for some innocent explanation. But the evidence was unmistakable. The way Camilla looked at this Michael, the intimacy of their body language, the fact that she had rented an apartment under a false name. It painted a picture he couldn't deny. "There's more," Robert said gently. "The investigator discovered that Michael has been writing a book. It's about their relationship. He thinks she's a widow named Catherine who lost her husband in an accident. She's told him an elaborate story about her past that bears no resemblance to her real life." Charles set the photographs down, his hands shaking. She created an entire fictional identity. The investigator also found evidence that she's been using a separate bank account, one you're not aware of. She's been transferring money to it regularly and using it to maintain her life in Millbrook. The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a systematic deception that had been going on for months. Every kiss goodbye, every loving phone call, every expression of affection had been tainted by her lies. "I'm sorry, Charles. I know how much you love her." Charles looked out the restaurant window, watching ordinary people go about their ordinary lives. He envied their simplicity. "I thought I knew her, Robert. We talked about everything. Or so I believed. How could I have been so blind?" "She's very good at this, Charles." The investigator said she's maintained both lives without either side suspecting the other. She's been planning her visits, coordinating her stories, even changing her appearance slightly when she goes to Millbrook. Charles thought about all the small things he had dismissed. The new clothes she claimed were gifts from her sister. The phone calls she would take in private. The way she seemed distracted sometimes when she returned from her trips. "What am I supposed to do with this information?" Robert leaned forward. "That's entirely up to you, my friend. You could confront her, or you could gather more evidence. The investigator is willing to continue monitoring the situation if you want more details." Charles gathered the photographs and slipped them back into the envelope. The weight of them felt enormous, as if they contained not just images, but the destruction of everything he had believed about his marriage. "I need time to think." "Of course. But Charles, you should know that according to the investigator, she's supposed to visit Millbrook again this weekend. She's told Michael that she's going away on business, but will return to him on Saturday." The casual way Camilla managed her lies amazed Charles. She had become a master at juggling two completely different lives. Two different identities. Two different loves. As they parted ways outside the restaurant, Charles felt as though he was moving through a dream. The familiar streets looked different somehow, as if the revelation had changed not just his understanding of his wife but his entire perception of reality. He drove home slowly, dreading the moment he would have to look at Camilla and pretend that everything was normal. How many times had she returned from Millbrook and kissed him hello while still carrying the scent of another man? How many lies had she told him while looking directly into his eyes? When he arrived home, the house felt different. The photographs and decor that had once represented their shared life together now seemed like props in an elaborate performance. Every object held the possibility of being connected to her deception. Charles went to his study and locked the door. He sat in his chair and opened the envelope again, studying each photograph carefully. In them, Camilla looked happy in a way he hadn't seen in their own relationship for months. Her smile was brighter, her posture more relaxed. It was as if she was more herself with Michael than she had ever been with him. The realization that perhaps she truly loved this other man made the betrayal even more painful. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, or a brief affair. She had built an entire alternate life because she was genuinely happier there. As evening approached, Charles heard Camilla's car in the driveway. He quickly put the photographs away and tried to compose himself. The front door opened, and her familiar voice called out to him, "Charles, I'm home." He took a deep breath and walked downstairs to meet her. She looked exactly the same as always. Warm smile, bright eyes, genuine affection in her expression as she approached him for their usual greeting. "How was your sister?" he asked, marveling at how easily the question came. "Oh, you know how she is. Always drama with her neighbors. But we managed to sort things out. How was your day?" Charles studied her face as she spoke, looking for signs of deception, but she appeared completely natural. Her ability to transition between her two lives was remarkable and terrifying. They prepared dinner together as they always did, sharing stories about their respective days. Camilla seemed genuinely interested in his activities, asking thoughtful questions and offering advice about his business concerns. If he hadn't seen the photographs, he would never have suspected that anything was wrong. That night, as they lay in bed, Charles stared at the ceiling while Camilla slept peacefully beside him. Her breathing was regular and calm, showing no signs of guilt or anxiety. How could someone live with such deception and still sleep so peacefully? He thought about their 3 years together, trying to identify when the lies had begun. Had she ever been completely truthful with him? Were there other secrets beyond this relationship in Millbrook? The foundation of everything he had believed about their life together was crumbling, and he wasn't sure what, if anything, remained solid beneath the rubble. Charles spent the following days in a strange state of suspended reality. He continued his normal routine, but everything felt hollow and staged. He watched Camilla go about her daily activities, tending to her garden, reading in the evening, making conversation over meals, all while knowing she was planning her next deception. She mentioned casually over breakfast on Thursday that she would need to visit her sister again on Saturday. "She's having trouble with that contractor I told you about. I promised I'd be there when he comes to give his final estimate." Charles nodded and made appropriate responses, but inside he was marveling at how smoothly the lie rolled off her tongue. According to Robert's information, she was planning to spend the weekend with Michael, probably telling him some story about being away on business. "Will you be back Sunday evening?" Charles asked, testing her. "I'm not sure yet. It depends on how complicated things get with the contractor. I might need to stay until Monday morning." Another lie, delivered with perfect casualness while she buttered her toast. Charles began to understand that Camilla had become two completely different people, and he was living with the version of her that was essentially a performance. After she left for her supposed appointment with the hairdresser, Charles called Robert. "I need to know more," Charles said. "I can't make any decisions without understanding the full scope of this. The investigator is already monitoring her weekend plans. He'll document everything and provide a complete report. Robert, I need to ask you something difficult. In your opinion, based on what you've observed, does she love him?" There was a long pause. "Charles, I think she does. The way she looks at him. Her body language when they're together. It's not just physical attraction. She seems genuinely happy with him in a way that, well, in a way that suggests deep emotional connection." The confirmation of what Charles had suspected hit him hard. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a temporary lapse in judgment. Camilla had found someone she genuinely cared about more than her husband. That evening, Camilla seemed especially attentive. She cooked his favorite meal and suggested they watch a movie together, something they hadn't done in weeks. Her behavior made Charles wonder if she was feeling guilty about her upcoming deception, or if she was simply maintaining her performance more carefully. As they sat together on the sofa, Camilla's head resting against his shoulder, Charles found himself studying her profile. He had memorized every detail of her face over their years together. But now he wondered if he had ever really known the person behind those features. "Charles, is everything all right? You seem distant lately." The irony of her concern was almost unbearable. "Just business pressures. Nothing for you to worry about." She turned to face him, her eyes showing what appeared to be genuine worry. "You know you can talk to me about anything, don't you? We've always been honest with each other." The words were like daggers. Charles managed a smile and pulled her closer. "I know. I'm just tired." Saturday morning arrived with unusual tension. Camilla packed her small overnight bag with the same routine she always followed for these trips. Charles watched from the bedroom doorway as she carefully selected clothes that he now realized she probably never wore around him anymore. She approached him for their goodbye kiss, and Charles found himself analyzing every detail. The way she held him, the duration of the kiss, whether there was any genuine emotion in her eyes. "I'll call you tonight," she said, a promise Charles now knew was another lie. "Drive safely," he replied, wondering if he would ever trust anything she said again. After her car disappeared down the driveway, Charles sat in his kitchen drinking coffee and staring at his phone. Robert had given him the investigator's number and told him he could get real-time updates if he wanted them. At noon, his phone buzzed with a text message. Subject arrived in Millbrook, 11:30 a.m. Currently at apartment building with target individual. Charles stared at the message, feeling sick. While he was sitting alone in their home, Camilla was beginning another weekend of her secret life with Michael. He spent the day trying to distract himself with work, but his concentration was shattered. Every hour brought another update. 12:45 p.m. Subjects left apartment for lunch at local cafe. 2:15 p.m. Subjects shopping at farmer's market. 4:30 p.m. Subjects returned to apartment building. Each message painted a picture of Camilla enjoying a completely normal, happy day with the man she really loved. Charles began to realize that her weekends in Millbrook were probably more authentic than any time she spent at home with him. That evening, as promised, Camilla called. "Hi, sweetheart. How are things going with your sister?" "Oh, you know how these contractor situations can be. We're making progress, though. How was your day?" Charles listened to her weave, another elaborate fiction about problems that didn't exist with people she wasn't seeing. Her ability to create detailed lies on the spot was remarkable. "I miss you," she said, and Charles couldn't tell if there was any sincerity in the words. "Miss you too. Get some rest." After ending the call, Charles received another text. 8:20 p.m. Subject and target individual observed having dinner at Romano's restaurant. Appeared intimate and comfortable. So while Camilla was telling Charles about her exhausting day helping her sister, she was actually enjoying a romantic dinner with her lover. The disconnect between her words and her actions was staggering. Sunday brought more updates throughout the day, chronicling a relaxed morning, a walk in the park, and what appeared to be a goodbye scene outside the apartment building that lasted nearly 20 minutes. Subject appeared emotional during departure. Extended embrace and conversation before leaving for home. Charles realized he was witnessing the end of one of Camilla's favorite weekends. And now, she would have to transform back into the wife who would return to him with stories about helping her sister. She arrived home Sunday evening, looking tired but peaceful. Charles recognized the expression now. It was the same look he sometimes wore after a particularly satisfying weekend. The kind of contentment that comes from spending time doing exactly what you want, with exactly who you want to be with. "How did everything go?" Charles asked. "We finally got the contractor situation sorted out. It was exhausting, but I'm glad I could help." She unpacked her bag in front of him, and Charles noticed that she had brought home a small bouquet of wildflowers. "My sister's neighbor grows these. Aren't they lovely?" Charles knew the flowers had come from Michael. He had probably picked them during their walk in the park and given them to her as a romantic gesture. Now they would sit on their kitchen table as a monument to her deception. That night, as they prepared for bed, Camilla seemed to study Charles's face carefully. "Are you sure everything is all right? You seem different somehow." Charles was amazed by her intuition. Despite maintaining her elaborate lie, she was still perceptive enough to sense his emotional state. "I'm fine, just work stress." She approached him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "We should plan a weekend getaway soon. Just the two of us. It feels like we've been so busy lately that we haven't had much time together." The suggestion was particularly cruel, though Charles suspected Camilla didn't intend it that way. She was probably feeling guilty about her weekend with Michael and trying to compensate by being a more attentive wife. "That sounds nice," Charles managed to say. As they lay in bed, Charles found himself wondering about the practical aspects of Camilla's double life. How did she manage her emotions so skillfully? How did she transition between loving Michael and being affectionate with Charles without any apparent psychological difficulty? He also began to wonder about Michael's perspective. Did he ever question Camilla's stories about being a widow named Catherine? Did he find any inconsistencies in her elaborate fictional background? The investigator had mentioned that Michael was writing a book about their relationship. Charles found himself morbidly curious about how Camilla had constructed her alternate identity. What kind of tragic backstory had she invented for herself? How detailed was the fictional life she had created? Monday morning brought a return to their normal routine. But Charles felt like he was watching their life from outside, as if he were observing strangers. Camilla made breakfast and discussed their plans for the week with the same warmth and interest she had always shown. But now Charles understood it was all performance. She mentioned that she might need to visit her sister again the following weekend. "She wants me to help her pick out new furniture for her living room." Another lie. Delivered with the same casual confidence. Charles nodded and made appropriate responses. But he was beginning to feel like a supporting actor in a play where only one person knew the actual script. After Camilla left for her appointments that day, Charles called Robert. "I can't continue like this much longer. The pretending is killing me." "What do you want to do?" "I need to confront her. But I want to understand everything first. Can the investigator find out more about this Michael and what Camilla has told him about her life? I'll ask him to dig deeper." "Charles, Are you prepared for the possibility that she might choose him over you? The question forced Charles to confront something he had been avoiding. I don't know. I don't even know if I want her to choose me anymore. How can I trust someone who lies so skillfully? How can I believe anything she says after this? Take some time to think about what you really want. Do you want to try to save the marriage? Or do you want to end it? The answer to that question should guide how you handle the confrontation. Charles spent that evening watching Camilla as she went about her normal activities, trying to imagine what their conversation would be like when he finally revealed what he knew. Would she deny everything? Would she try to minimize the relationship with Michael? Would she admit that she loved him more than her husband? He also found himself wondering if there had been other deceptions throughout their marriage. If Camilla was capable of maintaining such an elaborate lie, what else might she have hidden from him? The weight of keeping this secret was becoming unbearable, but Charles knew he needed to choose his moment carefully. Once he confronted Camilla, their marriage would be forever changed. Regardless of the outcome, there would be no going back to the comfortable illusion of trust and honesty they had shared. The investigator's final report arrived on Tuesday morning, delivered discreetly to Charles's office. The manila envelope contained not just photographs this time, but a comprehensive dossier that painted a complete picture of Camilla's secret life. Michael Harrison was indeed a writer, recently divorced, who had met Catherine Mills at a bookstore in Millbrook 8 months ago. According to witnesses the investigator had interviewed, Camilla had approached Michael after attending one of his poetry readings. She had introduced herself as a widow who had recently moved to the area to start fresh after losing her husband in a car accident. The fictional backstory Camilla had created was elaborate and heart-wrenching. She had told Michael that she had been married to a successful architect named David Mills, who died when his car skidded off an icy road during a business trip. She claimed to be slowly rebuilding her life, which explained why she could only visit Millbrook on weekends. She was supposedly settling her late husband's estate and dealing with complicated financial arrangements. Charles read through witness statements from cafe owners, shopkeepers, and neighbors who all knew Catherine as a gentle, grieving widow who was slowly learning to love again. The investigator had even obtained copies of sympathy cards that Michael had written to Camilla, expressing his admiration for her strength and resilience in overcoming her tragic loss. The most devastating part of the report was a transcript of a conversation the investigator had overheard between Camilla and Michael in a restaurant. In it, Camilla spoke about her growing feelings for Michael and her gratitude for finding love again after experiencing such profound loss. She talked about how different he was from her late husband, describing David as controlling and emotionally distant, while praising Michael's sensitivity and understanding. Charles realized that Camilla hadn't just created a fictional identity. She had invented a version of their marriage where he was the villain in her tragic backstory. Every complaint she had never voiced to him directly had been transformed into characteristics of her fictional dead husband. The report also revealed that Camilla had been more careful with her deception than Charles had initially realized. She had created social media accounts under the Catherine Mills identity, complete with photos that appeared to show her previous life with the fictional David. She had even gone so far as to create fake memorial pages and obituary notices to support her story if Michael ever searched online. Most troubling of all, the investigator had discovered that Camilla had been researching divorce proceedings. Her internet search history included queries about asset division, alimony, and how to prove emotional incompatibility in marriage. She had even contacted a divorce attorney, though she hadn't yet scheduled a consultation. Charles sat in his office, staring at the evidence of his wife's systematic plan to end their marriage while simultaneously building a new life with someone else. She wasn't just having an affair. She was orchestrating a complete transition from one life to another. That evening, Charles made his decision. He couldn't continue living this charade, and he couldn't allow Camilla to continue manipulating both him and Michael. The confrontation needed to happen immediately. When Camilla arrived home that evening, Charles was waiting in the living room with the investigator's report spread across the coffee table. "We need to talk," he said simply. Camilla's eyes immediately went to the photographs and documents. Her face went through a series of rapid changes: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally resignation. She didn't attempt to deny or explain anything. Instead, She sat down across from him with a composure that somehow made everything worse. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. 3 weeks. "The question is, how long has this been going on?" 8 months since I met Michael. The apartment in Millbrook, the false identity. All of it started about 6 months ago. Charles studied her face, looking for signs of remorse or guilt, but found only a strange kind of relief. "Why, Camilla? If you were unhappy in our marriage, why not just talk to me? Why create this elaborate lie?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "Because I knew you would try to fix things. You would want to go to counseling, make changes, work on our relationship, and I didn't want to fix things, Charles. I wanted to be someone else entirely." The honesty was brutal but appreciated. "So you created Catherine Mills." Sing Z. "I created the person I wished I could be. Someone without history, without obligations, without the weight of a marriage that had become more habit than love." Charles picked up one of the photographs, showing her laughing with Michael. "Do you love him?" "Yes." The simple admission hit harder than all the evidence combined. There was no hesitation, no qualification, just a straightforward acknowledgement that she had found something with Michael that she had never felt with Charles. "Does he love Catherine, or does he love you?" "He loves the person I am when I'm with him. Whether that's Catherine or me, I'm not sure there's a difference anymore." Charles leaned back in his chair. "You told him I was controlling and emotionally distant." Camilla's composure cracked slightly. "Charles, I never meant for you to hear those things. The stories I told Michael about David they were based on my frustrations with our marriage, but I exaggerated them. I made you into a villain because it was easier than admitting that we had simply grown apart. But we hadn't grown apart, Camilla. At least, I hadn't. I thought we were happy. You thought we were happy because I made sure you thought that. I performed happiness for 3 years, Charles. I smiled. I cooked your favorite meals. I laughed at your jokes. I shared your bed. But inside, I felt like I was disappearing." Charles tried to process this revelation. "Why didn't you tell me you felt that way?" "Because you would have tried to save me from disappearing. And I didn't want to be saved. I wanted to find out who I really was, without the weight of being your wife, your partner, your other half. I wanted to be whole, by myself. And you found that with Michael. I found that by creating Catherine. Michael just happened to fall in love with her." Charles picked up the report about the divorce research. "You're planning to leave me." I was working up the courage. The plan was to gradually create some distance between us, maybe suggest a trial separation, and then eventually pursue divorce. I thought, if I did it slowly, it would be less painful for both of us. While continuing your relationship with Michael, while continuing to be Catherine. Yes. Charles felt a strange mix of anger and admiration for the complexity of her deception. What about Michael? Does he deserve to know that Catherine Mills is a fiction? For the first time, Camilla showed genuine distress. "I've thought about telling him the truth, but I'm afraid he'll feel deceived. Everything we've built together is based on stories that aren't real. Everything we built together was based on a person who wasn't real either." Apparently, they sat in silence for several minutes, both absorbing the magnitude of the situation. "What happens now?" Camilla asked. Charles had been dreading this question, but he had already decided on his answer. "I can't continue living with someone who has been performing our entire relationship, and you can't continue lying to Michael about who you are. Both relationships need to end, so you can figure out what you really want." "Charles, I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Camilla. Not just by having an affair, but by making me believe for 3 years that you loved me when you were actually planning your escape. I did love you, in my own way. But I loved the safety and security more than I loved the person. That's not fair to either of us." And Charles gathered the photographs and documents. "I'm going to contact a divorce attorney tomorrow. I think we should try to handle this as amicably as possible. What about Michael? That's your decision. But he deserves to know the truth about Catherine Mills before he falls any deeper in love with a fiction." Camilla nodded, tears finally appearing in her eyes. "I'll talk to him this weekend." Will you tell him everything? I'll tell him enough. That I'm married. That I created Catherine because I was unhappy. That I need to end my marriage before I can be with him honestly. And if he can't handle the deception, Camilla wiped her eyes, then I'll have lost both of you. And maybe that's what I deserve. Charles stood up to leave the room, then paused. For what it's worth, Camilla, I hope you find whatever you're looking for. I just wish you had been honest about wanting to look for it. Charles, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly sorry for the way I handled this. I know you are. I just wish you had been sorry enough to tell me the truth before it came to this. The following morning, Camilla packed more than her usual overnight bag. She was planning to stay in Millbrook for several days to have the conversation with Michael and figure out their future together. As she prepared to leave, she turned to Charles one final time. Will you be all right? Charles considered the question. He felt devastated, betrayed, and completely uncertain about his future. But underneath all of that, he also felt a strange sense of relief that the pretending was finally over. I think so. Eventually. I hope we can be friends someday. Maybe, after we both figure out who we really are without this marriage. Charles watched her drive away, knowing it was probably the last time she would leave their home as his wife. The woman who returned, if she returned at all, would be someone different. Perhaps more honest, perhaps more herself, but certainly no longer the Camilla he had married. In the months that followed, Charles learned through their respective attorneys that Camilla had indeed told Michael the truth about her identity. Remarkably, Michael had chosen to continue the relationship, saying he had fallen in love with the person she was, regardless of the name she used or the stories she had told. They had moved in together in Millbrook, where Camilla legally changed her name to Catherine Mills, making her fictional identity real. She had found a way to become the person she had created, leaving behind not just her marriage but her entire previous life. Charles eventually rebuilt his own life, learning to trust again slowly and carefully. He never remarried. But he did find peace in understanding that sometimes people grow apart, not because of anything either person does wrong, but simply because they need to become different versions of themselves. The experience taught him that love requires not just affection and commitment, but also the courage to be completely honest about who you are and what you need. Camilla had lacked that courage, and her deception had destroyed their marriage. But in a strange way, her elaborate lies had also freed them both to discover who they really were without each other. Years later, Charles would occasionally wonder if Catherine and Michael were still happy together. If the relationship built on transformed truths had proven more durable than the marriage built on comfortable assumptions. He never tried to find out, understanding that some stories end not with resolution, but with acceptance that people sometimes need to disappear from one life in order to fully live another.